If procrastination has ever made you feel weak, broken, or incapable of discipline, this speech is not here to shame you. It's here to expose a lie you've been told your entire life. You were never lazy. You were never undisciplined. You were fighting your own biology with the wrong strategy. Your brain was not designed for long-term ambition. It was designed for survival, comfort, and minimal effort. And once you understand that, discipline stops feeling like a personal failure and starts becoming a system you can control. Most people believe procrastination is a failure of logic. They assume that if something is clearly important, beneficial, or necessary, the brain should naturally choose it. This assumption is wrong, and because it's wrong, it quietly destroys discipline before it ever has a chance to form. Your brain is not a truth-seeking machine. It is not a long-term strategist. It is not a motivational engine. Your brain is an energy management system. Every decision you make passes through a single filter before logic ever enters the picture. How much energy will this cost right now? Not tomorrow, not next year, right now. From a behavioral standpoint, this explains almost everything about procrastination. The human brain evolved under conditions of scarcity, danger, and uncertainty. For most of history, survival depended on conserving energy whenever possible. Wasted effort could mean death. Resting when you could, eating when food was available, and avoiding unnecessary exertion were not bad habits. They were survival advantages. Over thousands of generations, the brain learned one rule above all others: choose the path that delivers reward with the least expenditure of energy. That rule still governs you today. When you plan to work out, your brain doesn't evaluate your long-term health. It evaluates discomfort, energy loss, and delayed reward. When you plan to study, your brain doesn't consider future mastery. It sees cognitive strain, uncertainty, and no immediate payoff. When you open social media instead, the brain registers instant stimulation, predictable pleasure, and minimal effort. From an efficiency perspective, the decision is already made, often before you consciously decide anything. This is why telling yourself to just focus doesn't work. Focus requires energy. Resistance requires energy. Willpower requires energy. And the brain is designed to avoid spending energy unless absolutely necessary. Neuroscience refers to this tendency as cognitive ease. The brain is drawn to actions that feel familiar, simple, and effortless. Anything that feels complex, uncertain, or effortful triggers subtle resistance. Not dramatic resistance, quiet resistance, delay. Distraction, rationalization. I'll do it later is not laziness. It is the brain postponing an energy expense. Here's the critical insight most people miss. This process is not conscious. You don't sit there logically weighing pros and cons. The brain biases the decision before awareness kicks in. By the time you feel the urge to procrastinate, the efficiency calculation has already happened. This is why shame is useless. Guilt assumes choice. Procrastination often happens before choice. And this leads to the most important reframe. Procrastination is not a character flaw. It is a design mismatch. You are asking a biological system optimized for short-term survival to operate in a long-term abstract world without adjusting the conditions. Once you understand this, discipline stops being about forcing yourself to act against your nature. It becomes about working with how the brain actually operates. Disciplined people are not better at resisting temptation. They are better at removing the need for resistance. They understand that efficiency always wins. So instead of trying to become more logical, they make the disciplined action more efficient than the undisciplined one. This is why motivation is unreliable. Motivation spikes and crashes. Energy fluctuates, but efficiency is constant. The brain will always choose the lowest cost option available in the moment, always. So the question is no longer, why can't I stick to my plans? The real question becomes, why is my environment making the wrong behavior cheaper than the right one? When discipline fails, it's not because you didn't want it badly enough. It's because the cost structure was wrong. The effort required was too high. The reward was too distant. The friction was too heavy. Understanding this changes everything. You stop fighting yourself. You stop demanding heroics. You stop expecting discipline to come from personality. Instead, you start redesigning your world so that the efficient choice aligns with your goals. And once efficiency works in your favor, discipline stops being a struggle. It becomes automatic. That is the foundation. Everything else builds on this truth. Most people treat willpower as a personal asset, something you either have or you don't. They talk about discipline as if it lives inside the chest, like courage or confidence. Strengthen it, they say. Train it. Push harder. This idea is not just wrong. It is strategically dangerous. Willpower is fragile from a behavioral standpoint. Willpower is a temporary state, not a trait. It fluctuates with sleep, stress, hunger, emotional load, and decision fatigue. Every choice you make during the day taxes it. Every problem you solve drains it. By the time evening arrives, willpower is at its weakest, which is exactly when most people expect it to perform miracles. This is why discipline collapses in real life. The brain does not operate in a vacuum. Behavior does not emerge from intention alone. It emerges from context. The environment you exist in constantly cues, nudges, and shapes your actions, often without your awareness. What is nearby gets chosen. What is visible gets acted on. What is convenient becomes the default. This is not philosophy. This is behavioral science. When your phone is within reach, your brain does not experience temptation. It experiences availability. When junk food is in the kitchen, your brain does not feel weak. It follows proximity. When your work tools are hidden, disorganized, or difficult to access, your brain interprets the task as high cost and delays it automatically. The environment decides before you do. This is why two people with identical goals behave completely differently. One appears disciplined, the other appears inconsistent. The difference is not character, it is architecture. James Clear describes this as choice architecture. The way options are presented determines which option gets selected. Humans rarely choose the best option. They choose the easiest visible option. And the brain, as we've established, is an efficiency machine. Consider this carefully. Every moment of self-control you think you're exercising is actually your environment failing you. If you need constant resistance, your system is broken. Disciplined individuals understand this. They do not trust themselves to be strong later. They assume future weakness and design accordingly. They remove friction from desired behaviors. They add friction to undesired behaviors. This is not self-denial. It is self-knowledge. If you want to read more, the book is not stored away. It is left open where your eyes land. If you want to work out, the clothes are prepared in advance. If you want to avoid distraction, notifications are disabled and devices are physically distanced. Each small environmental adjustment shifts the cost-benefit equation in the brain. And here is the key insight. When the right behavior becomes easier than the wrong one, discipline disappears as a problem. The brain no longer resists. It complies. This is why relying on willpower is a losing strategy. Willpower requires constant energy expenditure. Environment requires a one-time decision. You suffer once, not daily. People who rely on willpower live in perpetual conflict. People who rely on environment live in alignment. And this reframes discipline entirely. Discipline is not something you do. It is something that emerges when the environment stops fighting your goals. If you are constantly failing, stop asking what is wrong with you. Ask what your surroundings are training you to do, because they are training you every day, silently, relentlessly. Your environment is either an ally or an enemy. There is no neutral. When you accept this, you stop trying to win battles at the level of motivation. You move upstream, you redesign the terrain. And once the terrain is right, behavior follows effortlessly. That is how real discipline is built. Motivation feels powerful because it arrives with emotion, energy, vision, urgency. But from a behavioral intelligence standpoint, motivation is one of the most unreliable forces you can build a system on. It spikes without warning and disappears just as fast. Preparation, on the other hand, is quiet, unglamorous, and brutally effective. This is the distinction most people never learn. Motivation is a feeling. Preparation is a decision made in advance. The brain does not act on what matters. It acts on what is available when the moment arrives. When you wake up tired, stressed, or distracted, your brain is not evaluating your goals. It is scanning for the path that requires the least effort right now. If the conditions are not prepared, the decision is already lost. This is why trying harder almost never works. Trying harder assumes future energy will be available. Preparation assumes it won't. Highly disciplined individuals operate from this assumption: my future self will be weaker than my present self. That is not pessimism. That is behavioral realism. Fatigue, emotion, and distraction are guaranteed. Motivation is not. So disciplined people shift the decision earlier in time to a moment when they are calm, rational, and intentional. They remove choice from the future and replace it with structure. Preparation works because it reduces initiation cost, the mental energy required to start. Initiation is where most habits die. No T during the activity, but before it begins. Once motion starts, resistance drops sharply. The brain prefers continuation over interruption, but starting feels expensive. Preparation makes starting cheap. When clothes are laid out, there is no search. When tools are ready, there is no setup. When a plan is clear, there is no negotiation. Each removed step is a removed opportunity for the brain to opt out. This is why preparation is not about being organized for its own sake. It is about eliminating decision points. Every decision is a chance for avoidance. Every delay is a chance for distraction. Motivation-based systems fail because they rely on emotional alignment at the moment of action. Preparation-based systems succeed because they function even when emotion is absent. This is also why people feel disciplined on good days and hopeless on bad ones. The behavior didn't change, the energy did. The system collapsed because it depended on mood. Preparation builds systems that work on bad days. Consider exercise. The unprepared person wakes up and decides whether or not to train. That decision is evaluated under fatigue, discomfort, and resistance. The prepared person wakes up into a sequence that is already in motion. Clothes are ready. Alarm placement forces movement. The playlist starts automatically. The route is known. The decision was made hours earlier. The action feels inevitable. That inevitability is the goal. Discipline is not about convincing yourself. It is about removing the option to negotiate. This is why preparation feels boring but delivers freedom. You spend a small amount of effort once, so you don't have to spend a large amount of effort every day. You trade momentary inconvenience for long-term consistency. And here's the deeper layer. Preparation respects how the brain actually works. It acknowledges energy limits instead of denying them. It accepts that resistance will appear and plans around it instead of pretending it won't. Motivation says, I'll feel like it tomorrow. Preparation says, I won't, so I'll act now. That mindset shift changes everything. When preparation becomes your default strategy, discipline stops being emotional. It becomes mechanical, automatic, reliable, and reliability, not intensity, is what builds lasting change. That is why preparation always beats motivation. The human brain is not designed to create behavior from nothing. It is designed to repeat what already exists. This is a critical distinction. Most people fail at discipline because they attempt to build new habits in isolation as if behavior emerges through intention alone. It doesn't. Behavior emerges through patterns, specifically patterns the brain has already automated. The brain runs on loops. Every habit you have operates through a predictable structure, a cue, a routine, and a reward. These loops are deeply embedded because they save energy. Once a loop is established, the brain no longer needs to evaluate, or decide. It simply executes. That efficiency is the entire point of habits. Habit stacking works because it respects this structure instead of fighting it. Rather than forcing a new behavior into your life and hoping motivation sustains it, habit stacking attaches a new action to an existing loop that is already stable. You are not creating discipline. You are piggybacking on automation. This is why habit stacking is powerful. You eliminate the hardest part of any behavior, initiation. Initiation requires conscious effort. It requires attention, energy, and decision-making. Maintenance requires far less. Once motion begins, the brain prefers continuation. Habit stacking ensures motion is already underway. For example, brushing your teeth is automatic. You don't debate it. You don't need motivation. The cue already exists. When you stack a new behavior immediately after, stretching for 1 minute, deep breathing, a short reflection, the brain accepts it as part of the same loop. Over time, the new action inherits the automatic nature of the old one. This is not willpower. It is neural efficiency. The mistake people make is trying to stack behaviors that are too large, too vague, or poorly timed. Effective habit stacking follows strict rules. The added behavior must be small, specific, and immediate. Small because the brain resists high energy costs. Specific because ambiguity creates hesitation. Immediate because delay breaks the loop. After I make coffee, I will write one sentence, not write more, not work longer. One sentence. This works because it bypasses resistance. The brain does not feel threatened. Once the sentence is written, momentum often carries the behavior forward. But even if it doesn't, the identity vote has been cast. The loop remains intact. Habit stacking also creates behavioral momentum. Momentum is the most underestimated force in discipline. The brain hates starting, but it loves continuing. Once engaged, stopping requires more effort than proceeding. Stacked habits exploit this bias. Over time, these stacks compound. One behavior triggers another. The day becomes a sequence instead of a series of decisions. This is what disciplined lives look like from the inside. Not intense effort, but smooth transitions. And this reveals the deeper purpose of habit stacking. Removing choice. Choice is expensive. Every choice is a negotiation with resistance. Habit stacking replaces choice with structure. You no longer ask whether you'll do the behavior. The cue answers for you. This is why habit stacking feels mechanical. And that's exactly why it works. Discipline is not supposed to feel heroic. It's supposed to feel boring and automatic. Eventually, the stacked behavior becomes inseparable from the original habit. You don't remember to do it. It happens. That is automation. That is the goal. When enough of your day operates this way, discipline stops being something you manage. It becomes something that manages you in the right direction. Habit stacking doesn't make you stronger. It makes resistance irrelevant, and that is real control. Most people try to change behavior at the surface level. They focus on actions, routines, and goals. They ask, what should I do differently? This approach can produce temporary change, but it rarely lasts. Real, permanent discipline does not begin with behavior. It begins with identity. This is the level most people never reach. Your brain is constantly trying to remain consistent with who you believe you are. This is not motivation. This is psychological self-coherence. Humans experience discomfort when their actions contradict their self-image. To reduce that discomfort, the brain either changes behavior or it rewrites the story about who you are. Most people let the story win. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with discipline, every failure reinforces that identity. Each delay becomes evidence. Each lapse becomes proof. Over time, the identity hardens and behavior follows automatically, not because you want it to, but because the brain is protecting coherence. Disciplined people reverse this process. They do not wait for identity to change before acting. They use small actions to vote for a new identity. Each completed behavior, no matter how small, sends a signal. This is who I am now. The brain tracks these signals. It updates its model of you based on evidence, not intention. This is why tiny, consistent actions are more powerful than dramatic effort. Large actions feel impressive, but they are unstable. Small actions are repeatable. Repeatability is what reshapes identity. From a behavioral intelligence perspective, identity is the most efficient form of discipline. When an action aligns with identity, it requires less energy. There is no internal debate. The brain is not asking, should I do this? It's confirming this is what we do. This is also why forcing behavior through willpower feels exhausting. You are fighting your own self-concept. The brain resists because the action does not match its internal model. Identity-based discipline eliminates that conflict. Notice how people speak when identity is solid. I don't miss workouts. I don't skip deadlines. I don't negotiate with myself. These statements are not motivational. They are descriptive. The behavior flows naturally from the identity. The key is understanding that identity is not declared. It is earned through repetition. Every time you execute, even for 2 minutes, you cast a vote. One vote doesn't change much, but votes accumulate. Eventually, the brain stops questioning. The identity becomes default. This is where discipline becomes self-sustaining. And here's the crucial insight. Identity change does not require liking the behavior. Enjoyment is irrelevant. Consistency is what matters. You don't have to love training to become someone who trains. You don't have to enjoy studying to become someone who studies. You only need to act in alignment often enough for the brain to accept the pattern. Once identity shifts, systems lock in. Habits reinforce self-image. Self-image reinforces habits. The loop closes. At this level, discipline stops feeling like control. It feels like expression. You are not forcing yourself to act. You are acting in accordance with who you are. This is why identity is the final lever. Environment shapes behavior. Habits automate behavior. But identity stabilizes behavior. Without identity, systems decay. With identity, systems persist. So the real question is no longer how do I become disciplined? The real question is, what kind of person am I proving myself to be today? Answer that through action, and discipline takes care of itself. Stop asking why discipline feels so hard. Start asking why your life is structured to make failure easy. You don't need more motivation. You need better design. And once your systems are aligned, discipline stops being something you chase. It becomes something you can't escape.